Hello everyone, this is Anthony from One Cut Studio. This series seeks to compare the rule set and changes between the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons and the newer 2024 edition. As a DM, my party and I have been using 5th edition for a long time, and we're trying to decide whether or not to make the jump to the 2024 rule set. If you, like me, want to know what changes have been made and if you should make the switch, then this series is for you. We're going to explore main classes, subclasses, and core rules. I'll try to provide one-to-one comparisons whenever possible, but as a disclaimer, I will also share my own opinions as to the design and content. Today, we're going to look at the Paladin class. So here are the core features or core traits of the Paladin. As you can see, not much has changed. You still have your D10 hit die, saving throw proficiencies, skill proficiencies, weapon proficiencies, armor, and tools all stay the same. The only thing they made a change here with the core features and traits is, you get to choose either package A for starting equipment, which includes the chainmail, the shield, the longsword, and the gear, or B, they just say here, 150 gold pieces, buy your kit yourself. So I kind of like those changes because with the 5th edition, it was a little bit convoluted. You had separate bullet points, and you had to choose an option from each one of the bullet points to kit out your character. Whereas in the 2024 edition, it's very simple. It's either A, you get this, or B, you buy it yourself. So let's look at some of the core features. And we have quite a bit of changes when it comes to the Paladin between the editions. Features that are highlighted in green are new, added. Features highlighted in yellow have their mechanic changed, and features in red have been removed. There are some caveats to that, though, as we'll see later on. So we'll go level by level and go into detail with some of those changes. So you'll see on the left we have the 5e features, and on the right we have the 2024 features. So at level 1 at 5e, you had Divine Sense, Lay on Hands. In 2024, you have Lay on Hands, but the mechanics have changed. You get your spellcasting earlier. So in 5th edition, your spellcasting came in at level 2. In the 2024 version, spellcasting starts at level 1, which is great. They've added this new feature called Weapon Mastery, which we've talked about in previous videos, which allows you to use some properties of weapons that you have mastered to do more things in combat. At 2nd level, you still get fighting style, and spellcasting was moved further. It was moved earlier on, so 1st level for that. Divine Smite becomes Paladin Smite, and there is a nerf alert there, which we will talk about. In 5th edition, at 3rd level, Divine Health, that is gone. That has been completely nerfed, and it does not make a comeback. You get your Sacred Oath. In the 2024 edition, it's your Paladin subclass. So subclass still stays the same, and you get Channel Divinity, which you also got at 3rd level in 5th edition, but it was part of your Sacred Oaths. They just added it as a separate, feature in 2024. But still, the Channel Divinity options that you get still relate to your Paladin subclass. So that's not much of a difference, other than they added Divine Sense as now part of Channel Divinity. So, you don't get it at level 1, your Divine Sense. You get it at level 3 in the 2024 edition. All right, moving on. Ability score improvement level 4, that has stayed the same. So has the extra attack option at level 5, with the addition of a new ability called Faithful Steed in 2024. Aura of Protection still level 6, but the mechanics of Aura of Protection have changed very slightly. Level 7, level 8, and those haven't changed. You still get your subclass feature, ability score improvement. When we get to level 9, in 5th edition, you got nothing, but they added in something. Actually, Abjure Foes should be highlighted green because that's a new addition. So that's a new addition to 2024. At level 10, you still get Aura of Courage. Again, the mechanics have changed only slightly. At level 11, Improved Divine Smite is Radiant Strikes in 2024. Just a name change and a little bit of a mechanics change. Level 12 and level 13 have stayed the same. Level 14, Cleansing Touch is renamed Restoring Touch, although I decided that the mechanics are completely different, that I got rid of Cleansing Touch. It's like basically getting rid of Cleansing Touch completely. But Restoring Touch has a buff alert. I think it's actually a really good change to Cleansing Touch, which we'll talk about as we get down there. Level 15 and level 16, level 17, that has stayed the same between the two editions. At level 18, your aura improvements, it's the same improvements you get in level 20, the 2024 edition at level 18, which is basically your aura expanding from 10 feet to 30 feet. So that hasn't changed. Moving on, level 19, you don't get a level 19 ability score improvement. This is a running theme now in the 2024 edition. Those have been replaced for an epic boon. And then at level 20, you get your subclass feature is your capstone. So some classes, your capstone is not reliant on your subclass. For the Paladin, it still is. Your capstone is part of your Sacred Oath or subclass. So let's get into some of the changes a little bit more in depth. Starting at level 1, in 5e, your Divine Sense. It's removed from level 1, but it's not gone. It comes back, like I said, again later on. So we'll talk about the changes between the Divine Senses when that comes up in the 3rd level. So in 2024 Lay on Hands, there is a little bit of a change here in the mechanics on Lay on Hands. I think it's there's some good things about it and there's some bad things about it. So in both editions, you have access to a pool of hit points that is equal to 5 times your Paladin level. That doesn't change. And you can use that pool to either heal hit points or spend 5 hit points to, cure an effect, basically. And in 5th edition, that was a disease or neutralize a poison on a target. And you can, stack multiple times. Just with one Lay on Hands, as long as you expend the hit points necessary, you're able to, cure multiple diseases or poisons. And then the other caveat is that the feature didn't have any effect on undeads or constructs. So how does this change in 2024? Well, it's no longer an action. So 5e was an action, 2024 bonus action, which is really good for the Paladin's action economy. You can spend 5 hit points in the pool to remove the poisoned condition from the creature. So that's essentially the same as neutralizing a poison. You're removing the poisoned condition, but they're stipulating just because you spend those hit points, you're not curing that. You're not giving them hit points back. So it's removing the effect, but not healing. So they just wanted to make sure that that was clarified. One of the things that it leaves out is disease. So your Lay on Hands doesn't cure disease anymore. So that's one of the nerf aspects of it. So the good things, Lay on Hands is a bonus action. It no longer cures disease. That's the bad. And then there is no stipulation in 2024 saying that you can't use it on undead or constructs. So that's good. And they just also clarified that you can use it on yourself, which I think in 5e, that wasn't an issue. People knew, hey, you could use it on yourself. But they just wanted to clarify that in the wording in 2024. Moving on to spellcasting. So, like I said, the big change is Paladins now get spellcasting at 1st level in the 2024 edition. And again, how you prepare spells changes. So it's no longer contingent upon your charisma modifier and your Paladin level. There's that convoluted formula of half your Paladin level plus your charisma modifier is the number of spells you can prepare per day. They simplified it. It's in the table now for 2024. It's like you get 2 first level spell slots at first level. You can prepare 2 spells, and then it increases as you level up the number of spells that you can prepare. One of the things that they removed is that prayer requirement. So anytime you want to change your prepared spells, you must pray a minute per spell level on your spell list. So in the 5th edition, you could basically swap out your entire list of spells, right, after a long rest. In the 2024 edition, you can swap out 1 spell from your list. Again, you don't need to pray to do it, but it limits you in how much control over your spell list, basically. So whatever you choose for your spells, be sure that you like them, because you can only swap out 1 now after a long rest. So there's some good things and there's some bad things when it comes to spell casting. But having a paladin have spells accessible at first level, I think, is a good change. And then streamlining the process for preparing spells, also a good change. The ability to only change out 1, I'm on the fence about. Because sometimes you just want to have access to more spells. It depends on what you're doing for the day and anticipating your need. So, but let's be honest, what do paladins really use their spells for? They burn them for Divine Smite. So I guess, because you're not a heavily focused caster, it doesn't really make sense for you to really need to swap out your spells all that often. Moving on to level 1 weapon mastery. This is that new thing where you get 2 kinds. For a paladin, you get mastery property of 2 kinds of weapons, which you can change after a long rest, and you learn how to use their mastery property. And each type of weapon comes with a special maneuver that you can do with them. So cleaving with a great axe, or toppling someone over with a lance, that type of thing. I've talked about this in the past, how I just don't agree with, after a long rest, you forget mastery of something you've previously mastered. To me, it's just a flavor issue. Moving down to fighting style, one of the changes between 5e and 2024 is that fighting styles are now classified as feats. If you've seen my fighter video, you'll know you've seen that. And at 2nd level, as a paladin, you get to choose a fighting style. 5e, there weren't that many options. In 2024, there are a lot more options of a fighting style that you can choose from. And you can even choose something different called Blessed Warrior instead of taking with a fighting style, which allows you 2 cleric cantrips. So that's another option, giving you just a lot more things that you can do as your paladin. Unlike the fighter, though, once you choose a paladin fighting style, you can't change it based on level. The only thing that you could change is if you took Blessed Warrior, you could swap out those cleric cantrips anytime you take a paladin level. Other than that, if you take a fighting style, you're stuck with it. Okay? So then I know some of these fighting style options came from the 5e supplemental materials, and they added it in. So blind fighting is new. That gives you blind sight to range of 10 feet. They nerfed great weapon fighting, which instead of re-rolling a 1 or a 2 on a damage die, you just take a 3 instead. So that's a little bit of a nerf. Interception's new, where you can use your shield to reduce damage done to a creature within 5 feet of you. Thrown weapon fighting is new. And unarmed fighting is also new. I would refer to the fighter video if you want to see a little bit more in depth about what those fighting styles are. I'm not going to go over those again as well. So let's talk about the bread and butter of a paladin, which is their divine smite. And there is a nerf alert on here. And the biggest change is that divine smite is now considered a spell. So in 5th edition, basically you you expended a spell slot to deal extra radiant damage. And if you expended higher spell slots, it was an increase in damage die. The effects of Divine Smite are still the same. So basically, you're using a spell slot because you're physically casting a spell this time. And you can cast it at a higher level, and you'll do the same amount of damage, and you still get the extra damage if the target is a fiend or undead. What 2024 edition of the Paladin Smite does is it gives you Divine Smite as a spell that you always have prepared, so it won't count against the spells that you can have prepared. And you get one freebie of it. One freebie of the casting between long rests. So let's look at the stats for Divine Smite spell now, because it's a spell. It's a bonus action, which you immediately take after hitting a target with a melee weapon or an unarmed strike. So what this does is, instead of allowing a paladin just to keep, if they have an extra attack, say you have 2 attacks. In 5th edition, a paladin theoretically could smite on each one of those attacks. And the 5th edition paladin, in my opinion, was a little overpowered when you combine the ability to stack smites and also their basically immutable aura, which we'll get to later on. So Divine Smite is now a bonus action. So that means that if you have extra attack, if you're attacking twice, you still only get 1 bonus action, which limits the amount of times that you can do Divine Smite in a turn. So you have to do it immediately after you hit a target with a melee weapon or an unarmed strike. There is a verbal component to it. So this means a couple of things. The bonus action limits it to once per turn. The verbal component means it can be stymied by silencing the spellcaster. And since it's technically a spell, it can be counterspelled. So for those reasons alone, I believe that Divine Smite has been nerfed. You get 1 freebie casting, that's great. But does that freebie only apply to a first level casting? It isn't exactly clear in the wording. So definitely a nerf there. I know some paladins won't like that. Here's another nerf, level 3 Divine Health. Your paladin is immune to disease. That was 5th edition. This feature is now removed from 2024. So just like the monks, now paladins can also get down with the sickness. Now we're moving on to level 3, the Sacred Oaths, or the Paladin subclass. I also included Channel Divinity because that's when it's introduced at level 3. So if you look at 5e, the Sacred Oaths, you have Oath of Devotion, Oath of the Ancients, Oath of Vengeance. In 2024, they still have those 3 oaths, but they also added the Oath of Glory, which I also believe came from another 5e supplemental source book. You get your oath spells, which don't count against your list of prepared spells. And then you get Channel Divinity. So in 5th edition, your Channel Divinity was tied to your oath. So you learned, a Channel Divinity that was based on what oath you took. And you got to use it after a short or long rest before you could use it again. You got 1 use of it. In 2024, you start off with 1 effect, and now we bring in Divine Sense. So your Divine Sense is no longer an ability where it's tied to your Charisma modifier. It's a Channel Divinity feature. And you get 2 uses of it, which is great. And you regain 1 of those after a short rest, and you get all of them after a long rest. So it gives you more options or more opportunities to use Channel Divinity. And then you get an increased use of Channel Divinity at level 11. So that's a good feature I think they added. Which, when we look at some of the oaths later on in another video, we can compare those channel divinities and see what types of things that they have. But another difference, so if we compare the Divine Sense now between 5th edition and 2024, it's no longer an action, it's a bonus action, which is a nice boost, which is great. And the duration changes too. So instead of in 5e lasting until the end of your next turn, you get it for 10 minutes or until you become incapacitated. So for 10 minutes, bonus action, you turn that switch on, you channel divinity. For 10 minutes, you know the location of any creature of the types, the celestial, fiend, or undead, within that 60-foot radius. The other thing that they took away was the behind total cover. So in 2024, even if that creature is behind total cover, you recognize them as being there. And you still have the ability to detect if an object or place has been consecrated or desecrated. So that's really good. That's a good change to Divine Sense, if you ask me, and including it as part of Channel Divinity. The only negative is you get that at level 3 instead of level 1. So let's talk about level 5, this new ability called Faithful Steed. I guess Paladins really like having a mount, and this will get you one. There's a separate stat block in the spell list. That way you don't have to fuss around with, like, what are the stats for a griffin? What are the stats for a draft horse? What are the stats for a reindeer if I summon one of those? It's a specific stat block that scales based on level, and, you know, it streamlines the process for having a celestial or infernal steed for your paladin. It's still kind of a meh ability, but nice, I guess, if you always want to have a ride. So let's talk about level 6, Aura of Protection, which has a nerf alert. Now, I do think that the aura of a paladin a paladin's aura in 5th edition was very powerful, because it was a god-given ability or a divine-given ability, and you couldn't suppress it with anti-magic. Short of knocking out the paladin unconscious, which is often difficult to do, you really couldn't turn off that aura, and that aura gave the party big boosts to their saving throws, and staying clustered in a tight little circle, they would become very formidable, and a challenge to basically crack that nut of the aura of the paladin. So in 2024, what they did was they changed a little bit of the wording to just, clarify, hey, this aura is unseeable. It is a 10-foot emanation, but the big difference is the aura can be deactivated if the paladin is incapacitated. Now, if you're unconscious, you also are incapacitated. However, there are other conditions that lead to being incapacitated, such as being stunned. So if a paladin is stunned, in 2024, it says you're also incapacitated. That aura shuts off. Another thing that they clarify is that if another paladin is present, you can't benefit from having another aura at the same time. So the benefits of overlapping auras don't stack, but you get to choose which aura you use. So you have a stronger paladin who has a stronger saving throw bonus. You can choose theirs instead. But either way, the auras work the same. It's a bonus to saving throws equal to your charisma modifier. So I do like this rebalance for the paladin, because before they were a juggernaut of power with extremely powerful abilities who had very little in the way of countering or neutralizing those abilities. Moving on to level 9, Abjure Foes. This is a new ability for 2024. As a magic action, you can spend one use of this class's channel divinity to overwhelm foes with awe. You present your holy symbol. You can target a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier that you can see within 60 feet of you, and they have to make a wisdom saving throw or have the frightened condition for 1 minute or until they take any damage. And while frightened this way, a target can only do one of the following things on its turns: move, take an action, or take a bonus action. So I don't really understand this. Why are they trying to turn the Paladin into a Cleric Light? This very much seems like the turn undead feature. There's a couple differences as to why it's not turn undead. It's because it affects more than just undead. This could affect any type of creature as long as they make their failed saving throw. The creatures do get one save. They do get the frightened condition, but unlike turn undead, where they have to run away from you, the creatures still can do actions. Even though it's limited, you're limiting their actions, they can still move towards you even. They can still take an action, which they could still attack you, or they could take a bonus action. The only good points I see to this are the fact that they don't get to make a saving throw at the end of their turn. So it lasts for that duration. So it's not like, they can keep making a save to get out of it. It lasts or until they get hit. And then the other fact is that can affect creatures other than undead. But I'm just curious why they didn't just make Abjure Foes part of a Channel Divinity feature, because you're using it to do this thing anyways. So it's just a little strange to me. Let's move on to level 10, Aura of Courage. So in 5th edition, basically, while your party or allies were within your aura, they couldn't be frightened while you were conscious. And that range increases to 30 feet at level 18. So the only change to this one for 2024 is you and your allies have immunity to the frightened condition while in your aura of protection. Again, if your aura of protection, if you become incapacitated, that ceases to function. If a frightened ally enters the aura, that condition has no effect on the ally while the ally is there. However, if they leave your aura, they still have the frightened condition. Does having immunity to the frightened condition, it's a little unclear. You might be able to make an argument saying that it suppresses, not eliminates. Immunity to the frightened condition, but the way it's worded later, if it enters the aura, the condition has no effect while they're in there. So does that mean the aura immediately erases the frightened condition? It isn't very clear. So there's arguments to be made whether it suppresses, not eliminates. So moving on to level 11, which is Improved Divine Smite or Radiant Strikes. This is that extra D8 radiant damage that you do with your attacks. That hasn't changed. The only thing that they added to it was that you can also add it to unarmed strikes. Apparently, with the 2024 edition of the Paladin, they're also letting them use unarmed strikes too, which is good, because if the divine power is flowing through you, it makes sense that it will go through your unarmed strikes as well. So here we come to level 14, which is Cleansing Touch in 5e or Restoring Touch in 2024. So this one got a little bit of a change here. So in Cleansing Touches, you use your action to end one spell on yourself or one willing creature that you touch. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, and you regain expended uses when you finish a long rest. So ending spells on allies is pretty cool. But they changed it in 2024. You're no longer ending spells. You're ending the effects of those spells, those conditions that those spells give. So now Restoring Touch is part of Lay on Hands. And remember, it's no longer action. It's a bonus action, which is a good thing. But these are the conditions that you can remove. blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, or stunned. And those are actually pretty strong. So you still must expend the 5 hit points from your healing pool of Lay on Hands for each of the conditions you remove. And again, they clarify that if you use those 5 hit points to restore those, remove those conditions, you're still not restoring hit points to the creature. So yes, you are ending a spell affecting a creature, but you're removing the harmful condition those spells most often inflict. And again, you still cannot remove disease, but the conditions you are able to remove are still pretty powerful. And a lot of these conditions that you're removing sometimes aren't caused by spells, they're caused by the feature of a monster. So, some sort of gaze, eye gaze that makes the creature frightened. Well, ending a spell wouldn't make sense because it wasn't a spell. But ending the condition, that makes more sense. If your fighter got stunned by a monk's stunning fist, that's not a spell. So you wouldn't have been able to use Cleansing Touch to end it. However, you can use your Lay on Hands to end it now. So I really think that this rework of Cleansing Touch to Restoring Touch is a huge benefit for the Paladin. Moving on to level 18, we have Aura Expansion. In both editions, it hasn't changed. At level 18, your 10-foot aura is now 30 feet. In 2024, the Aura of Courage is considered part of Aura of Protection, so it's not a separate overlapping aura, which can be how it is interpreted in 5e. But either way, its flavor and mechanic is the same between both editions. At level 19, goodbye ability score improvement. You get your epic boon now. So let's talk, and then at level 20, your capstone is going to be part of your oath, just like it was in 5e. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the meh. Good. Aura of Protection, the rebalance for your Paladin being incapacitated. That's good from a DM standpoint. Probably not from a player standpoint, but for a DM who wants to shut down a Paladin in his aura, I like the change. Restoring Touch, more options, and also they're not contingent on them being spells. Excellent. Lay on Hands being a bonus action, yes please, that's great. The bad things. Divine Smite, this can be, it's good for the DM, bad for the players, if you ask me. It can be countered now. Hallelujah. Thank you for the DMs. That's a win for the DMs. And also, it's limited to 1 because you can only have 1 bonus action. Lay on Hands does not cure disease. I guess with the 2024 edition, the designers wanted characters to get sick. I don't know why, but I guess disease is something that was easily taken care of in 5th edition, and I agree. Maybe disease should be a little bit harder to get rid of and affect your players a little bit more often. Removal of Divine Health. Again, Paladins aren't going to like this. They can get sick now. They got to start taking their cold medicine. And here's the meh. Faithful Steed. You always have your Uber on standby. Abjure Foes. It's a light version of Turn Undead that affects other creatures. And then the Epic Boon, like I've said before, I just think it's a cheap, easy way for a level 19 character to get a quick boost in power. So those are the changes to the Paladin. I hope you liked this video. I found it somewhat informative. If you did, please give it a like, comment, or a share. And we'll see you in the next one.